Hello, patrons. How are you? It's me. It's Queen Auset-Heru, and thank you for being here. Um, Guys, I put this movie on trial that scared the shit out of me. Okay. Yeah. Let's talk about this movie. Okay. Oh my God, Becky. I put on trial The Witch. This movie came out in 2015. Now, it was part of like a film festival. So I think it came out in 15 and I think it came to the big screen in 2016, if I'm not mistaken. So The Witch was a very interesting movie because according to what I read about online, because after I watched it, I was kind of disturbed, okay? And I had to go through further research because I was like, what the hell did I just watch, okay? So I had to go do some further research. Let me explain a little bit about this to you. This movie is set in the 1630s. So the 1630s is around the time of like the Puritans, 13 colonies. Think about that time period. That's what we're talking about. This is around the time of the real witch trials, the Salem witch trials. And the witch trials were going on in Salem, but they were also going on in Europe as well. So they died down after a while because people realized that it was just mass hysteria and that most of these innocent people weren't even real witches. So if you want to know more about that, read the history of the Salem witch trials. It's very disturbing. Anyway, so it's around this time period. This family is a family of 7. Now, they're in New England, and everybody knows that New England during that time was very religious, very religious. You had the Puritans and different groups up there, and the Quakers came. It was a lot of groups that were just extremely religious. Not as if anything is wrong with it, but some of the times it led them to this kind of mayhem, of this kind of paranoia that we're getting ready to see. So can you imagine being in America in the 1600s? It's only 13 colonies. Most of the country is still woods. There's very little infrastructure. There's all kinds of disputes going on sometimes between the Native Americans and the English people and the Europeans who've come. Sometimes they're at peace, sometimes they're not. Because at different times in the movie, you actually see Native Americans chilling. They're like chilling with the Europeans sometimes. And then we all know sometimes that peace led to massacre, murder, and all kinds of stuff happen. So sometimes they were at peace and sometimes they were not. So you get the chance to see that even in the movie. So in the movie, we're talking about this time period. And because these people were so, like I said, so what I would call religious fanatics, it led to these monstrosities known as witch trials. So this movie is basically a Puritan person's worst fears come true. That's basically what this is. This is what they feared would happen. The devil and the witches and all this, kind of stuff. They feared this is what was going to happen. And the reason why this is still an issue is because there's still people today that believe this shit that they made up during this time. If you take a look at the witch trials, a lot of stuff that you believe or you've heard about witches, such as riding on broomsticks and dancing naked with the devil in the woods, things like that, all came from the witch trials and the coerced confessions from these witches who mostly were just regular people. They weren't even practicing witchcraft most of the time. So this movie is basically a Puritan's worst nightmare. This is what they feared was going on and was going to kill them and their families in their sleep, So this movie is pretty rough. It is a horror movie, and I've seen scarier movies. I've seen movies that had all those jump scares, every 15 seconds. I've seen scarier movies, but this movie was terrifying. It's psychologically terrifying, because if you put yourself in their position and you think about it, it's like, ooh, this is not good. So the first thing we're going to do is I'm going to tell you the summary of the movie. Then we're going to count the vices and talk about them. And then we're going to count the virtues and talk about them. Okay? And then I'm going to tell you a grade I'm going to give this crazy movie. Number one, summary. Like I told you, it's a family of 7. Okay? They have been banished. They've been exiled from the larger community. Apparently, they're in this, like, I guess they're Puritans. They didn't really say, but I guess they're Puritans, and they're in this, religious, colony or whatever the case is. It might be like about 200 people there or something like that. And this man, who's part of the colony, has a dispute with the elders, cusses them out, or tells them off, I'll say, because I don't think he said one foul word. He told them off. And whoever did this movie did a great job with the language in the script, because it was perfect. The language was perfect. The setting was perfect. The costumes, everything was great. So anyway, this man gets into an argument with the elders, and basically he tells them to go to hell. He's leaving. He don't care what they say, basically. He took his wife and his 5 children, packed them up on their wagon, and left town. They found a piece of land near like a river or a brook or something. I'm not sure how far away it was, but they rode for a while. They found a piece of land near some water and decided to build there. Now it's near the woods. For some reason, early Americans or the Europeans who settled in America during this time, for some reason, they thought that the devil lived in the woods. I'm not sure where that connection came in. Probably because the woods are kind of scary, especially at night. All the creepy noises and stuff. So they thought the devil lived in the woods, and him and his witches, which was his wives, lived in the woods and danced and frolicked and killed people who just so happened to be unsuspecting and walking through the woods. So they decide to build near these woods, near this water. Now, the father doesn't mention the whole devil in the woods thing. That comes up later. But he decides to build there anyway for whatever reason. He never says. He just picks a spot, and him and his wife are sitting there holding hands like, this is our spot, okay? So he goes on to build a life there. So the 7 of them are there. They have a house. They have a barn. He's a hard-working man. Think about Pa from Little House on the Prairie. That's the kind of man he was. Very hard-working kind of guy. So he builds this, little teeny farm area. They have like a horse and a goat, maybe another goat, a couple animals, not too many. And they start to live this life, this solitary life of just them out in the woods. And slowly but surely, strange things start to occur. The first thing that occurs is the daughter, the oldest daughter, is out in the wood, is out near the woods, not even in the woods, on the edge. She's like playing with her baby brother, and the baby is a newborn. So here they are playing, playing peekaboo or whatever the case is, and she puts her hands over her face and opens them up, and the baby is gone. Just that fast. Vanished. So she's screaming, oh my God, Sam, and she goes home and the baby's just gone. So a scene later, you see this witch in a shed basically using the baby's blood for, her ritual of some kind. She's rubbing it on herself, and at first the baby's alive, and then you don't see the baby no more, and she got blood in a cup, and you like, okay, in a bowl, and she's stirring it or whatever. So anyway, so then after that happens, the brother takes ill, just things keep on happening. The crops start going bad. These are all things that they associated with witches back then. If your crops start going bad, if people start getting ill, if your goat stops giving milk, these are all things that you've been hexed and cursed by a witch, according to the Puritans. So the family starts to believe they're cursed. So they start to turn on each other, and basically eventually all the eyes turn towards the oldest daughter. And everybody thinks that she's a witch and she's bewitched the family. She's screaming and crying that I've done nothing. It's like awful, it's awful. So the movie goes from bad to worse, because basically what ends up happening is by the end of the movie, the whole family's dead. The whole family's dead. The baby got carried off by the witch. Her brother got carried off by the witch. The older brother got carried off by the witch, and then the witch brought him back, or let him come back, and then he dies with his family. Then the goat, or the goat or ram or whatever, one of the animals that had the big horns, kills the father. Come to find out, that's the devil. He's been the devil the whole time in disguise. I mean, this movie was really disturbing. And then the oldest daughter kills her mother, and the two twins are murdered by the witch in the middle of the night. So this movie was just like really messed up, and I was just watching it like, this is what the Puritans were fearing. No wonder they had all that paranoia. If they were thinking that witches were going to come and kill them in the middle of the night and use their baby's blood to bathe in, like, oh my God. Anyway, so that's the summary of the movie. So by the end, everybody's dead except for the oldest daughter. And come to find out, surprise, surprise, she wasn't a witch, but the devil, and the witches do want her. And she is then recruited into the coven. At the very end of the movie, she agrees to the devil's terms and becomes a witch. But the kind of witch that she is this stereotypical witch that Puritans are afraid of, that never was in the first place. It's kind of like being scared of the boogeyman. There really is no boogeyman, but when you're a kid, you can't tell you that when you're a kid, right? Oh my goodness. All right. So let me finish telling you guys the vices now. So that's the summary of the movie. That's basically what happened. And these are the vices. Okay, so this is the stuff that just don't happen. Witches do not do this stuff. And I'm just sitting there rolling my eyes at the movie. Like, really, movie? Number one, baby snatched in the woods. Witches do not typically, generally, for sport, steal babies and bathe in their blood. This is a Puritan fabrication, if you want to call it. This is a lie, basically, that they made up. So a lot of people were afraid of this, and I guess if you lived in a hut out by the stream and the only thing close to you was some woods, you might be afraid of what's out there. So I guess that's how these kind of things came about, but they ended up being used to kill thousands of people. 2, witch living in a cave. There generally weren't witches out there living in caves. Even in this movie, it was like they had a witch that was out there living in the cave, and the devil was, out there dancing with her. But typically that isn't what was going on. Typically none of that was going on. 3, witch sacrificing baby and bathing in his blood. And I don't know not one single pagan group that would recommend you snatch and kidnap babies and bathe in their blood. I've been to a lot of pagan ceremonies. I've had a lot of discussions with pagans from different parts of the world, and none of them ever said, hey, when was the last time you snatched a baby and bathed in their blood to keep yourself looking young? I would hang up and turn them into the authorities, okay? Never heard that before. That is awful. And noises in the woods. The noises in the woods, they kept attributing to the devil and to these witches. In reality, it was probably animals in the wind. I mean, how many times I don't know about you guys, but I've been in the woods before and freaked myself out. One time I was in the woods and could have swore I saw a lion. I could have swore I saw a lion. Now, what is a lion doing in the woods in the middle of Valley Green in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania? I'll never know. But you can freak yourself out because it's so, it's quiet and the noises and things snapping and rattling, is that a bird? Is that what is that, So, yeah, noises in the woods can freak people out. It don't have to be evil. It could just be something in nature. Now, another thing was this mysterious rabbit and ram. Apparently, the witches and the devil turned themselves into animals to deceive and to, to stalk this family, because the rabbit kept popping up and the ram lived with them. His name was Black Phillip, if I'm not mistaken. And he ended up killing the father. And according to the movie, he was really the devil in disguise. So the Puritans had this unrational fear that even the animals could be evil, and that they were probably shape-shifting humans, shape-shifting witches, or the devil himself shape-shifting, and not really just an animal. So the rabbit wasn't just a rabbit, it was a witch. And the ram wasn't just a ram, he was the devil himself. So I would love to be able to shapeshift into animals and go, undetected, but this is something that we can't do. Nothing happening. Then the oldest son, his name was Caleb. He was seduced and bewitched in the woods. Another thing they used to say is that your husband and your sons will be seduced and bewitched in the woods, and the witches will kill them, or they'll take their souls, or they'll use them for blood, or that kind of thing. Again, witches don't generally seduce and bewitch people in the woods and then use their body parts and their blood for baths and rituals. This is like really sick. And it's like, you can tell how this came out of the mind of fiction. Like, you can tell when you listen to it, but it's people that really believe this. The twins began to scream and could not remember their prayers. At one point, the mother told the children to pray. And the children started to scream and say they couldn't remember their prayer. This comes directly from the Salem witch trials, because at one point, some of the kids, and the Salem witch trials began with a group of kids. It was a group of kids, and the maid name, I think her name was Tituba, if I'm saying it properly. And she was from the West Indies, and she was the only one that might have actually been into some form of witchcraft. We don't know for sure, but the West Indies and different parts of the Caribbean and all over Africa, a number of different places, even Europe, has different forms of magic. So she probably was versed in maybe even a little bit, but she might have been young when she left and probably didn't know that much. So apparently they were accused of witchcraft. They were all, jailed. And the young kids at one point started to scream and say they couldn't remember the Lord's Prayer. And a lot of people now look back on it that they were just acting. And this was one of the things that they did. One of their acts was to scream and have fits and say they couldn't remember their prayers and things like that. That witches will destroy your crops. I don't know any witches that destroy crops, but I do know that the Puritans believed that witches would destroy your crops. So if your crops started to fail, they would automatically blame witchcraft, when in reality it was probably mold, or something else, weeds or something. I don't know anything about crops, but I do know that there are a lot of other things that happen, especially during that time period. There were a lot of other things that happened that could make a crop fail other than being, bewitched. The goat didn't give milk, just blood. That was another sign. If your goat stopped giving milk, or it was giving blood or nothing at all, that was another sign that your family had been bewitched, according to the Puritans. When again, there's probably another explanation for that as well. Let's see. The children accused the goat of talking and being the devil. The children are the ones who said they could talk to the goat. That's how all that started. So I don't know any children or adults that ever were pagans and told me that they could talk to goats and the goat was the devil. Like, never. This is like total fabrication. All right, whatever vices we got. We got a couple more vices here. The devil appears at night. So out of nowhere, the devil just comes and starts talking to the girl after her whole family is dead. She goes into the barn or something, and the devil just comes and starts talking to her. And Puritans honestly believed that the devil would appear to young women, particularly women, because women were thought to be more susceptible to the charms of the devil. So that the devil would just appear and then enchant you in the middle of the night, and you would start to coerce with him and have sex with him and dance with him, and now you are a witch. And this is what happens to the oldest daughter after the whole family is dead. Then the devil, I told you before, Black Phillip, that's his name. Black Phillip was the ram. So it's said that, the whole time that the animal was this evil beast. The devil has her write her name in his book. Another thing that came out of the witch trials is that every witch must write her name in the devil's book. I'm like, what? So the devil has some ledger of all of his women, basically, and you have to write your name in his book. And if you write your name in his book, you now are the whore of the devil, And first of all, in most pagan groups, there is no devil. There's negative energy. There's even evil energy. There could even be evil spirits, maybe, but they don't have like a devil character, like somebody who's in charge of hell, and in charge of the hounds, and in charge of the demons and the bad spirits. Pretty much they're free agents. Pretty much they're not under this like umbrella, under this group. So there is no book to write your name in. There is no leader who is writing you in the ledger, that kind of thing. This is definitely somebody's imagination. None of this should even make sense. That's why it really trips me out that people actually were murdered for, they were actually killed and hanged for witchcraft, if this was the testimony. Like, seriously, like, this doesn't even make common sense. So I'm just like, that's how you could tell that mass hysteria from being afraid and being so Christianified and being afraid of the woods and all that kind of stuff going on. And all of this is what made this possible. All this paranoia. And then the devil has her disrobe, because of course the devil wants you naked. And naked, to some of us, nudity, especially the pagans, nudity is beauty, is just your natural form, your raw form, how you came into the earth. But the Puritans saw nudity as evil, as wickedness. They even called it wickedness in the movie. So he has her disrobe. So obviously, when she takes off her clothes, she's ready to now be wicked. She's now ready to be the whore of the devil, And then the last part was she started to levitate in the woods. I was watching it and I was like, I wish I could levitate. I really do. But nothing happening. So we're going to count the vices, and then we're going to move on to the virtues. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. We have 15 vices. Now let's see how many virtues we have. Number 1, the costumes and the setting. I love the costumes. I love the setting. Like, their clothes looked exactly like what I would imagine Puritans would have on. All covered up, layers, boots, like they didn't have anything like pretty or dainty or, this was hard living. Okay. This was real hard living. And the setting showed hard living as well. They were like sleeping on the floor with pillows that were stuffed with like goose feathers or something. I think they might have had one bed in the whole house. I mean, like, you could, from watching it, the setting looked good. It looked like what I would imagine that time period would have looked like. I love the setting. I love the costumes. I love the acting too. That's my next one, my second virtue. I really did like the acting. All of the actors did a good job. Children, the child actors, everybody. I love the father. The father was very devout and hardcore. I liked him a lot. But then it was like he loved his family, and you could tell that he loved his family. And he, to me, gave the perfect representation of a Puritan father, how they would have seen themselves. righteous and pious and loving and protective, you know. And he went through a lot of changes in the movie because he you know, he felt bad having taken them out there in the wilderness and things weren't working out, so he felt like crap, and his wife did not make things easier. I liked her too. She was hysterical all the time. I liked her. She looked the part too. Very plain looking, you know, long hair that was always back and bundled and knotted up, you know. The oldest daughter, Thomason, who probably had the majority of the lines in the movie, I liked her too. She looked very young and virginal. You know, she had that kind of innocent look to her, perfect energy. So I did like the acting a lot. They gave their all with their performances. And so that's 2. Let's go to 3. Our third one is night terrors. The oldest girl starts to have night terrors, and it is very common to have night terrors when something like that is happening. You know, if there is something paranormal on the negative happening, it's very common for people to have night terrors. Let's see the next one. Mass hysteria, the kind that started the witch trials in Salem. Yeah, that's one of the things that I had to write down. It was so much mass hysteria. It was crazy. I mean, like, it was ridiculous. Like, at one point, you know, the little girl accused Thomason of being a witch, and then Thomason accused her little sister of being a witch. Then the father takes them all and puts them in the barn and locks them. He like hammered them into the barn, you know, because it was like hysteria. He thought they were going to kill him in his sleep, you know. So like the whole thing, it was like so much like hysterical energy coming from everybody. Then the mother was scared of her daughter and thinking that she was the one that was doing this, and the whole thing was just crazy. So the hysteria was very, very accurate, and I like that. The family believed that they are cursed. Usually, if you have, like I said, if you're a Puritan and all this stuff starts happening, you are going to think that your family is cursed. The whole family dies. I had mentioned this earlier. I did like the way they did the deaths. The father was killed by a goat. The witch killed and took the twins, and Thomason killed her mother. I liked the way it happened, because when Thomason kills her mother, she didn't kill her because she wanted to. She killed her in self-defense. But we know that as the audience watching, but somebody else would have thought that she just snapped and killed her mother. So basically, that was the end of it, okay? So that's everything. You got the virtues and you got the vices. How many virtues do we have? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. We have 6. So there's 6 things that I liked, and I think it was 14 or 15 things that I thought was terrible sins. What did I give this movie? I gave this movie an F, because this movie had no real witchcraft. There wasn't none. There wasn't a cauldron. There wasn't a real spell. The only thing I could say is that we do have rituals, pagan rituals, where some people choose to dance naked. In this case, they weren't dancing, they were levitating and like chanting and moaning and screaming. But we do have rituals where people, like for instance, Beltane. Some people do a Beltane ritual where they dance naked in the woods. Some people do skyclad, rituals. And skyclad means to do rituals naked. So some people do that normally, and it's all voluntary. You don't do it because you're coerced or you have to. But a lot of people choose not to participate, and that's fine. But the nudity is seen as beauty, is seen as being energetic and connecting with source and that kind of thing. It's not seen as exploitative or sexual, or it's not supposed to be. In a coven that's doing it right, it's not supposed to be sexual or exploitative or anything along those lines. It's supposed to be beautiful, and it's supposed to be connecting to your source. So I thought that was like really the only like smidgen of maybe could have been real witchcraft. But honestly, there was no witchcraft. There was no herbs. There was no oils. There was nothing. It was all made up fears that pilgrims had, or Puritans had, or whatever. I don't know what group they didn't tell us what the name of their group was, but whatever this group was, it was their fears. No real witchcraft. And the reason why this movie I thought was so profound and so important is because a lot of people still believe these things, and a lot of those beliefs started right during this time period. There's still ignorant people who say these things to me. There's still people who accuse me of being in league with demons. I'm like, are you freaking serious? Like, that doesn't even make sense. And a lot of this vibration started right during this time period. So I give this movie an F because there's no real witchcraft, and it's dangerous. It's dangerous to go around telling people that this is the truth about witches, because it's not. This was never the truth. This was always fiction that came apart at the seams. And that's why the witch trials ended, because somebody was like, you know what, this don't make sense, finally. All right, so that's this edition of the witch trials. This movie is worth a watch, because even though I gave it an F, it's a good movie. It's a very good movie. It actually won some awards, and from what I understand, whoever it was that did the movie was said to have done a lot of research to make sure it was historically accurate. So check this movie out. I hope that you guys like it. Thank you for listening, and please come back next week, because I'm going to review something else and tear it apart. Okay? See you later.